You wouldn't think you could see a sound or photograph a speed, but those are just two of the ways scientists are building up a picture of how our sun works on the inside. Deep within the sun, in the swirling cauldron of hot plasma called the convection zone, there are bubbles, rather like the ones in boiling water. And like those water bubbles, the ones in the sun create a noise. As they get to the surface, these bubbles of sound squeeze the plasma so it gets brighter in places and at the same time moves upwards. And by measuring that upward and downward movement, the instruments aboard the SOHO spacecraft have enabled scientists to look for the very first time into the depths of a star. These changes, which are incredibly small relative to the vastness of the sun, are as hard to measure as the track of a snail crawling across its surface would be. We could never hear the sounds the sun makes by ordinary means, not just because it's 150 million kilometers from Earth, or because space is a vacuum and sound doesn't travel through a vacuum. The problem is that our star has a very, very deep voice and sings with a very slow rhythm. The sounds ring at a very low frequency, once every 5 minutes. But by recording the natural sound and accelerating it 42,000 times, SOHO has compressed 40 days of recordings into a few seconds. And this is the actual song of the sun.
And so what you have in the traditional 200 years of Egyptology is a complete overlooking of this phenomena, and that's primarily based upon the misinterpretation of the Metu Neter, or as commonly understood or known as the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Most of the work that was translated by Wallace Budge was faulty translations, and you can see in many instances where the Eurocentric mindset couldn't conceive of what was actually taking place in the minds of the Neteru, Nature Nation. They interjected into the text the closest thing that they could conceive in their mind to try to determine what was actually being said. But the overall evidence in that is that what you see is a purposeful mistranslation of certain words that are key words to opening up and understanding the text in general. And so what we actually have here is a phenomena that's occurring within nature that carries with it the actual language of the Creator. As we have seen, the doctrines that were actually brought by Akhenaten, the Pharaoh Akhenaten, the husband of Queen Nefertiti, was actually the doctrine of the Hamemet when he established Aten as the chief deity in ancient Kemet at that time. There was a actual phenomena which our ancestors represented which was the actual voice of God manifested in as nature itself. Um, so what you will see in traditional Kemetic iconographies and illustrations on the pyramid walls and the temple walls, um, you will typically see the sun in either one of three relationships. Either you will see the sun sitting directly on the head of one of the Nitirus, of a Neter or Negert, god or a goddess. Um, or you will see the sun alone in the sky, um, extending rays in a 360-degree radius, just showing that that was the intent, that they knew the sun gives off rays in all directions. All of the iconography had specific intent in the message itself. And in the third relationship, you will see the sun either suspended in the sky or resting upon another Netiru's head, extending rays from the star or the sun directly to the face of the individual who is before them. And you won't see any other relationship with the sun in that fashion, other than these beams of rays are specifically orientated towards the head of the person who is receiving it. So when you look at the different iconographies, you will see that, for instance, in one iconography, you can see the actual color code within each ray of the beam of light. It kind of looks like a color binary code. I think we have an image of that right here. Not only see this relationship coming directly from the sun itself, but you will see this exact same relationship occurring within stars. Some of the reliefs from the golden shrine of Tutankhamun depict this same relationship, where they are extending, the stars in the skies are extending beams directly to the forehead. The beams that are emanating from the stars, and it's an important point to wiser stand here, that stars and suns, a sun is a star is a sun, they're both the exact same thing. But one very important point to note here is that in the ancient reliefs that show the starlight, the beams of stars or sunlight coming directly to the head of an individual, if you look at the pattern within each one of those beams, what you're going to see is actually an ancient representation of a modern day solar spectrum. And you have the dark angstrom lines going all the way through, the dark lines with different chemical values, representing different chemical values in nature. No different than a regular modern solar spectrum recording of sunlight today. You see these dark angstrom lines running all the way through each one of the beams. These lines each represent different chemical values in nature. But what was missed in the representation of this is that these angstrom lines also not only just represent different chemical values in nature, but they also represent auditory values. These auditory values is basically what makes up the language of the Hamemet itself. And so what we're doing here is that we're effectively demonstrating that the Metu Neter, or as commonly known, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, wasn't merely the language that represented the people who were indigenous to that region. It did not solely represent their spoken language and the language that they used to read and write in, although that was an intricate part of the language itself. But the totality of the language of the Metu Neter, specifically as it was manifested in hieroglyphic form. You have different forms of ancient Kemetic writings. You have the classic hieroglyphs, and you have the Demotic script, the cursive hieroglyphs. But in the classic script, which is the pictoriograms, or the modern day, what we call the hieroglyphs, this language that has been coined, the Metu Neter, are actually translations of the language of the Creator. That language was represented in the Metu Neter, or the Kemetic hieroglyphs, under the term the Hamemet. And the Hamemet literally translates as solar language of the sun and stars. And what you will find in that is that they make references in the Pert Im Heru, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, speaking exactly about this phenomena. And we know that all things that have anything to do with modern civilization are stolen legacy from ancient Kemet. That is an established fact, although it's still not widely accepted around the world for obvious reasons. Nevertheless, in the manifestation of this language, you have divine guidance from the Creator. The references say in the Pert Im Heru that we speak with the language of God and we translate this language in the language of men, and that was the actual phenomena that was occurring with the Metu Neter, or with the hieroglyphs. But our ancient ancestors had a working, functioning, wiser standing of how this phenomena took place. And scientifically, we can prove and demonstrate the same phenomena as it's occurring to show the proponents of a language. So taking a closer look at what was actually brought by the Pharaoh Akhenaten, and all of the different reliefs of the sun disk Aten, and the mannerism in which it's extending its rays, displaying its rays, is more evidence that goes to support the passages that are found in the Pert Im Heru. Today we can scientifically measure this phenomena and effectively demonstrate its occurrence in nature. In the morning time, you see when the sun rises and the sun shines on a planet, on a plant, and that flower receives that sunlight and it just blossoms and it opens up. Well, that's a communication process that's taking place, that's contained within the rays of the sunlight itself. The actual phenomena is one that, in receiving divine instructions and guidance from the Creator through the Hamemet, which is the solar language, this is the language of sunlight, the Creator sends to you every day divine wisdom and divine guidance and divine knowledge on how to navigate here on the plane of things made manifest. And this message is sent via sunlight. This is the doctrine that Akhenaten originally brought. Within the rays of sunlight, you have particles that's called photons. And these photons carry encrypted bits of information. And these photons, when they reach your body, are absorbed by the melanin molecule and is transferred from one melanin cell to the other, all the way until it reaches the neuromelanin cells in the brain, where it's stored while the body is secreting serotonin. Then at nighttime, when the body begins to secrete melatonin, these neuromelanin cells are activated and they start decrypting this information. And once this information is finally decrypted, it appears to us in the form of what we commonly know as or understand to be a dream. And this is the reason why you will see in biblical texts, primarily whenever God spoke to a prophet, this message came through a dream itself, and which is subsequently why the first language was a language of pictures, of pictorials, because they were translating the images inside of their head that were received via these photon encrypted particles that arrive through sunlight itself. So we're talking about an actual phenomena where you receive this divine guidance. You look at the relationships of ancient Kemet, of the scribes and the high priest, and this is what their actual purpose was, is to record, to write down, to record. And the thing that they were recording first and foremost were dream interpretations. They were the images that were manifested by the dreams that was a part of this divine guidance that was received via sunlight, via the solar language, via the Hamemet. And you even can find references in the Bible to this same phenomena in Psalms 19, verses 1 through 6, where they are explaining the exact same phenomena of the Hamemet, of the solar language, where all of the stars of the heavens are broadcasting this language. It's like a celestial internet, and all of the stars are broadcasting, and the text begins by acknowledging that and says there's no place where their voice is not heard, and even go on to say that they have even set a tabernacle for the sun. And most people don't know what a tabernacle is. It comes from the word tenderi, which is where they got the word tent from, which is an extension. And that's what a tabernacle is, an extension. And the extension of the sun is its rays, is its beams. But you will see this same relationship being described in Psalms 19, 1 through 6. Well, there are 3 times in which the solar language is orientated for people. At other intervals of the day, the solar language is orientated towards other melanated things in creation. we have to understand, or have to understand rather, that 98% of the universe is dark matter. That's cosmic melanin. That means if you took every sun, every star, every galaxy, and balled them all in a one ball of mass, they would only make up 2% of the known universe. Even light itself contains melanin. Light is nothing really more than triple manifest darkness turned inside out on itself, like sticking your hand in a sock and turning it inside out. That's what you're witnessing when you see white light. Then the evidence that the white light is made up of melanin, different hues, is you take white light and you shine it through a prism, and when it manifests on the other side of that prism, it's going to manifest a rainbow of 6 manifest hues. Well, if you take all of those different colors of the rainbow and you merge them together, what color will you have? That's correct, black, darkness. So melanin is in everything. It's either in a progressive form or it's in a regressive form. So the solar language is orientated to all melanated things in creation that has melanin, progressive melanin. And so a message can be sent as a whole to creation, but not intended for all of creation to receive the same message in the whole. So you have different intervals throughout the day when the solar language is orientated towards people. And those times are at sunrise itself. Sunrise is one of the beginning intervals or doorways where this knowledge is orientated on a channel that's suitable for us. And the next interval opens up at zenith or noon. And then the last interval for us opens up at sunset. Throughout the rest of the day, between those two periods, the solar language is orientated for other different aspects of creation itself, to receive the messages that is, or instructions that is specifically designed for them inherently in nature itself. So you will see this phenomenon occurring from time to time. Things in nature responding to sunlight. Sometimes it's a noticeable manifestation, and other times it's very subtle. Yet we know that this manifestation of a language in the rays of the light itself is a phenomenon that is occurring. It is a phenomenon that can be measured. It is a phenomenon that was recorded in ancient text where references, direct references, are made to this language. One of the reliefs in the Pert Imheru says that the beams can't be translated. The rays of Ra can't be translated, not can be told the message that are in them. The only way to come to a conclusion about what is really going on, and as the phenomenon is occurring, is to refer to the ancient writings of Punt, of Nubia. So we have to go back, and we have to go back to the text of ancient Nubia, which again is the Metu Neter as well as the Meroitic script. We have to go back to these to begin to even translate correctly what is being given to us instructional wise, because we are so far removed from the element of receiving and even hearing this language.